Discontinued watches are an interesting point in the watch industry. Some watches are discontinued and nobody really cares. They weren't popular models, they maybe weren't as attractive as people wanted. They were maybe a bit obscure and they get discontinued because of that. And nobody really cares, they get on with their day and they buy their next watch. But there is an exception. Sometimes bigger brands discontinue watches that they know will be collector's items, or more collectible if they discontinue them. And there's a certain watch that I think will be discontinued in 2023 and potentially become a collector's item. Welcome back to the Chisholm Hunter channel. My name is Harrison as always, and today we're talking about a watch that I think will be discontinued, and I think it will become a collector's items. And there's a couple of different reasons to that, but first, let's stop teasing you and let's talk about the watch. The watch in question, of course, is the Omega Seamaster 300 meters in grade 2 titanium, the James Bond model which is featured in the movie No Time to Die, which is quite ironic. This watch was introduced in 2019 to mark the release of the No Time to Die James Bond movie. But remember that 2019 was just when the pandemic was beginning and the world subsequently was in crisis. So the movie actually didn't go into the cinemas until 2 years later in 2021 after being delayed twice. That is a little bit of background info about when this watch was released and the sort of circumstances of its release. But here's the thing, why is it going to become a collector's item? This marks the end of an era for most people, including Daniel Craig himself. This was the last movie that Daniel Craig will be featured in as James Bond. He is giving up his crown. He is marking his next successor. But here's the thing, no matter who replaces Daniel Craig will always be James Bond in my eyes, because that's what I've grown up with. I would say that between 18 years old and 30-year-olds, Daniel Craig is James Bond. You have that sentimental attachment to Daniel Craig. No matter who was before Daniel Craig. Who was before Daniel Craig, Drew? Pierce Brosnan. And I think who was the other one, the Scottish guy? Sean Connery and Pierce Brosnan. They might be James Bond to you because that's the generation you grew up in. And you'll have a sentimental attachment to those people. But I have a sentimental attachment to Daniel Craig. And you can't put a price on sentimental value because it's priceless. And on that note, we need to pause this video to bring to you our biggest giveaway yet. This is the 20k giveaway. It is a Tissot PRX light green, which in my opinion is the most attractive Tissot PRX out. And all you need to do for your chance to win is firstly hit that subscribe button. Secondly, comment with what is on your wrist today. And thirdly, head to our Chisholm Hunter Watches Instagram page and drop us a follow. Thank you guys so much for supporting this channel. It is truly heartwarming, and this is my gift to you. I'll tell you a story, or I'll tell you a couple of stories actually. I used to work in the Chisholm Hunter store in Edinburgh on Princess Street, and I remember specifically people coming in and asking for certain limited edition numbers because, let's say for instance, it was lucky. They might have a lucky number. They would pay premium for that specific number because they have that sentimental attachment to that number. Now, when it comes to a movie like James Bond, I remember watching James Bond with my dad. So whenever I see an Omega Seamaster or a James Bond model, I'm reminded of the time that I watched James Bond with my dad. I know that I would pay a premium for that. Just to put this into perspective, just to summarize and make this sort of paint a clear picture for you guys, I want you to do a little bit of homework because I've just done it and it really shocked me. Have a look at the cars, the Aston Martin cars that have been featured in James Bond. I know that the DB5 was featured in No Time to Die and 6 other James Bond movies, and then you have the DBS that was in Casino Royale, and they just destroyed like 20 of these gorgeous cars. Honestly, almost made me cry. But just look at the prices of them and how they have gone up in correlation with the movies. On a final note of why I think this watch will be discontinued, and as to why I think it will be a collector's item, I think the reason that this watch spilled on, the production spilled over a couple of years, is because of COVID. Because we were going through a pandemic, the world was in a global crisis. And not a lot of these watches could be produced in that COVID period because the factories were shut down, etc., etc. However, it has now been in circulation for 2 years properly, and the 60th anniversary James Bond watch, the blue Seamaster version, has just been released. And I think that the time bomb that's ticking for the discontinuation is about to detonate. And on that note, it is time for the Chisholm Hunter tradition, which of course is the wrist check. What is on your wrist today? I'd love seeing all the weird and wonderful watches that you guys have on. I love seeing the stories behind those watches. Let me know in the comments. I am currently wearing the Tissot PRX, the green dial, which for the money is pretty unbeatable. And listen guys, it goes without saying that when a watch is discontinued like this, especially from a brand like Omega, it gains a lot of popularity. It gets rarer and rarer because they're no longer on the primary market. It no longer is the value that the brand dictate, it's the value that either the seller or the buyer dictates. And with the sentimental value added in there, I think it'll be a bigger price. But let's talk a little bit about the specs of this watch. This model comes in at 42mm in diameter and comes in grade 2 titanium. So it is a very, very light, compact watch. And I say compact because it's actually thinner than the original Seamaster. So the original Seamaster comes in at 13.7mm in thickness, whereas this model comes in at 13mm. Now, on Omega's website, they say that that's due to the domed sapphire crystal glass. But I don't really understand that, because surely if there's domed sapphire crystal glass, it would be slightly raised and make it that little bit thicker. If anyone here can help me, then it would be much appreciated. Drop it in the comments. This model sports a brown tropical aluminium bezel ring and also a brown tropical dial. And this is a huge detail to me that I actually really, really like, because if you imagine yourself as a secret agent, the one thing that you do not want to do is draw any attention to yourself, especially when you're undercover. And if you look at previous iterations, and actually the 60th anniversary model of the James Bond collaboration with Omega, they're quite bright blue. And in my eyes, they maybe draw the eye too much. But everything about this model in particular is dark, it's stealthy, it screams quality without screaming at people. To add to this agent kind of stealthy approach or stealthy feel, normally on the Omega Seamasters, you have a wave motif running through the dial. That is a big factor on why I got my Great White Omega Seamaster, because I just love that depth on the dial. But this dial doesn't have it. It's a lot more flat, it's a lot more subtle, and a lot more agentish. Before we go any further, we have a very exciting announcement. Chisholm Hunter have just launched the try-on feature on their website. And basically what that means is you can be sitting from the comfort of your own couch, take a photo of your wrist on the Chisholm Hunter website, and it automatically photoshops the watch onto your wrist. You don't need to visit a store, even though we have 28. You can try it on from the comfort of your own home. If you want to try that, make sure you hit that link below. The movement in this model is the Omega Caliber 8806, which of course is a self-winding automatic movement with a coaxial escapement. It's approved by KOSK and METAS, which is pretty incredible, and is resistant to magnetic fields reaching 15,000 Gauss. Also, it has a power reserve of 55 hours. It goes without saying that being an Omega Seamaster, this watch is water resistant to 300 meters. If ever you want to go diving in the depths. For me, I'm a bit of a desk diver, probably wouldn't take it diving, but it's pretty nice to know it's there. But let's move on from the details of this watch and talk about what exactly is unique about this model. What makes it a James Bond model? If you look really closely at the lower dial, you can see the broad arrow insignia. Now this is a symbol to mark the property of a British government operative, a nod to Bond's status as that government agent. The caseback is closed and it actually shows the numbers that correspond to the exact format of misissued watches. It has on the back number 62, and that refers to the year 1962, when Dr. No introduced James Bond to the silver screen. And that is what is unique about this collaboration with James Bond and Omega. But what I would love to know is if you agree with me. Do you think this watch is going to be discontinued? Do you think it's going to go up in value in the years to come? Do you agree that when you have a sentimental attachment to something, that it's priceless? Thank you all so much for watching this Chisholm Hunter video. If you enjoyed, please hit that subscribe button. If you like the style of these videos and like watches themselves, then head to our Instagram, Chisholm Hunter Watches, and drop us a follow on there. We post a lot of behind the scenes stuff. And I will see you guys in a couple of days.